Hey guys, today we want to talk about Mark Williams Thomas and his recent podcast statements around the Jay Slater case. Later on, we're also going to draw some striking parallels to another so-called expert from a different high-profile disappearance and explore what might really be motivating their behavior. Now, most of you are already familiar with the Jay Slater case. His disappearance, and later, the discovery of his body, in Tenerife during the summer of 2024 sent shockwaves through the UK. For those of us who've been following the case closely from the start, the idea that Jay simply wandered off into the mountains and died in a tragic accident never really made sense. The timeline didn't line up. Key people around him gave inconsistent or evasive statements. And the forensic evidence? It was thin. Even now, nearly a year later, one question still echoes louder than ever. What really happened to Jay Slater? Into that space stepped Mark Williams Thomas, a former detective turned media investigator. He flew out to Tenerife just days after the story broke, offered his help to Jay's family, and launched what he called an independent investigation. In a podcast released on May 5, 2025, he claimed that within 3 days of arriving, he told Jay's mother, Debbie Duncan, that there was no third-party involvement, and that Jay's death was simply a tragic accident. I said within the 3 days I will be able to tell you whether this is a third-party involvement, and within 3 days I did. I said that I believe there is no third-party involvement. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly podcast, May 2025. That's a clear, confident statement, but it doesn't line up with what he was saying at the time. Just weeks after Jay went missing, on July 7, 2024, Williams Thomas made a public statement suggesting his digging had uncovered an established criminal network with links to drugs, violent crime, and theft. The Sun, July 2024. That wasn't speculation about a fall. That was a clear suggestion of criminal involvement. Then in October 2024, months after Jay's body was found, Williams Thomas released a cryptic update on social media. He said he knew the real reason Jay left the Airbnb that morning, but refused to share it, claiming it wasn't the right time. This left the public hanging and understandably upset Jay's family. Jay's mom, Debbie Duncan, responded publicly, "If he knows something, I wish he would say it. Otherwise, people will think it's just publicity, and it's not doing me any good." Sunday World, October 2024. Fast forward to May 2025, and Williams Thomas has repositioned everything. It was never suspicious. It was always an accident, and he's known that all along. He even goes as far as to say, "I spoke to every witness out there." Podcast, 2025. But that's not true. While he did speak to Ayub Qasim, one of the last two men Jay was seen with, there is no evidence he ever spoke to the second man, Rocky. These two were the last people to see Jay alive, and only one was questioned. Mark also says he spoke to Jay's friends, but doesn't name them. Presumably he means Lucy, Brad, and Brandon. But these are the same people whose stories have changed repeatedly. Lucy, in particular, publicly stated she was in the south of the island and only spoke to Jay by phone that morning. But, according to court documents disclosed via a podcast in early 2025, Lucy told the Guardia Civil she was in Moscow with Jay that morning. That is a direct contradiction. And MWT doesn't mention it, not once. For a man who presents himself as evidence-led, trauma-informed, and truth-focused, failing to even acknowledge a timeline contradiction in a key witness statement is not just lazy, it's calculated. He also never presses why Jay left that Airbnb. He says Jay was walking quickly and wouldn't go back, but never asks why. What caused that urgency? What prompted that refusal? If Mark truly spoke to every witness, examined every message, and studied the terrain, then that behavior doesn't align with the idea of a casual walk that ended in a simple fall. So let's recap. June 2024. Privately tells Debbie Duncan he believes Jay's death was not suspicious. July 2024. Publicly links Jay's disappearance to an established criminal network. October 2024. Claims to know the real reason Jay left, but won't reveal it. May 2025. Claims he always believed it was an accident, and says he spoke to every witness. Never challenges inconsistent statements from Jay's friends. Never interviews Rocky, one of the last two men seen with Jay. never mentions Lucy's police statement contradicting her public story. This is not the record of someone chasing truth. It's the behavior of someone reshaping their own role, in real time, as scrutiny builds. For those of us who believe that foul play remains the most likely explanation, these omissions are not accidental. They're deliberate. Because the story Williams-Thomas is telling now is a much safer one for him. No loose ends, no responsibility. Just a final line. He fell. End of. But we remember what he said at the time. We remember the hints, the criminal network claim, the real reason tease. And now that he's calling it an accident, we have to ask, was Mark Williams-Thomas investigating what happened to Jay Slater, or managing how his own role in the case will be remembered? Because if you're going to claim it was no third party, then you better be prepared to explain why all the red flags were ignored. In the May 5th, 2025 episode of the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly podcast, Mark Williams-Thomas delivered his conclusion with finality. He fell. He died. End of. I mean, no one pushed him. There wasn't anybody else up there. His body wasn't... He wasn't killed somewhere else, and his body dumped there. He added, all the evidence telling me at the moment is that there is no third-party involvement. There's a brief disclaimer. I'm open to the option that that's possible. But everything else about the podcast makes it clear. He's not exploring it. He's dismissed it. But when you look at the actual facts and red flags in this case, many of which were raised or implied by Mark himself, this narrative does not hold up. The terrain. Jay's body was found in a steep, remote area of Tenerife's rural Deteno National Park. This wasn't a gentle walking route or a coastal trail. It was jagged, mountainous terrain, and with deep drops, harsh sun, loose gravel, and minimal shade, a place that's difficult to access, even for trained responders. The idea that an unprepared 19-year-old, with no food or water, wandered into that wilderness by mistake, without being seen again, deserves more scrutiny than it's been given. Mark never visited the site. He didn't walk the terrain. And still, he says he fell. End of period. The behavior. What stands out most is how quickly Jay left. He didn't wait for a lift. He didn't ask for help. He walked off alone, fast and never turned back. And it wasn't just speculation. On July 3, 2024, Mark himself posted an update saying, "We have received information that would suggest Jay left the rental property feeling scared and that he would not return to the rental, even though that would have been the most sensible course of action." Social Glow UK. He also referenced an alleged Snapchat from Jay about taking a 12,000-pound Rolex, implying Jay may have feared consequences or retaliation. LBC. So which is it? In July, Jay was scared. In May, Jay just fell. That's not evolution, that's contradiction. The timeline. The only confirmed eyewitness to Jay's movements that morning is Ophelia, who runs Casa Abuelatina and the Café Bar Masca. She says Jay asked about a bus, declined to wait, and walked off alone. Later, she said she saw him again walking fast uphill toward the ravine, adding, "It's easy to lose yourself up here." That makes her the last known person to see Jay alive. But there are problems with her credibility. Ophelia never appeared on camera. And when Jay's father Warren and brother Zach came to Masca to search, she reportedly closed the cafe and refused to speak to them. The son. Why avoid the family if you have nothing to hide? After her, there were no confirmed sightings. No traffic cams, no hikers, no CCV. The only other evidence was a location pin, allegedly sent by Jay to Lucy and Brad, and shared by them. But this screenshot has never been verified, and both Lucy and Brad have repeatedly changed their accounts. Still, Mark accepts it. He builds his timeline around it. No questions, no challenge. The witnesses. Mark claimed, "I spoke to every witness out there." But that's simply not true. He spoke to Ayub Qasim, one of the two men Jay stayed with. But he did not speak to Rocky, the second man in the apartment, who has since said he never gave a police statement and has never been confirmed to have been interviewed by anyone. And then there's Lucy. Publicly, Lucy said she was in the south of the island and only spoke to Jay by phone. But in her original statement to the Guardia Civil, Later disclosed in a 2025 podcast, she stated she was in Moscow with Jay that morning. That's a direct contradiction, and Mark never addresses it. He just accepts the version that fits. The search effort discrepancy. For over 3 weeks, the Guardia Civil searched the area using helicopters, drones, and trained dogs. They found nothing, no scent, no body. Jay's remains were eventually found on July 15th. Then, on July 16th, the Dutch Signy Zokonden team, brought in by Jay's family, began their own operation. Now here's what's important. They had no access to GPS data, no insight from police, just trained scent dogs. And those dogs independently tracked Jay's scent from the Airbnb to the exact ravine where his body had already been recovered the day before. Let that sink in. This was several weeks after Jay went missing, long after a scent trail should have degraded, in extreme heat, on unforgiving terrain, after multiple failed search passes. Normally, the longer you wait, the fainter the scent. But somehow the Dutch team found a strong, uninterrupted trail, even after 29 days. So what does that tell us? Either Jay wasn't in that ravine the entire time, or the Spanish authorities missed him completely, despite all their equipment and experience. And again, Mark says nothing about it. No mention, no reflection. The wildlife factor. Tenerife is full of scavengers, vultures, feral dogs, carrion birds. If Jay had been out there for nearly a month, nature should have found him before the authorities did. But there were no reports of animals disturbing the body, no signs of predation, no early warning from the environment at all. That silence in itself is suspicious. And Mark doesn't mention it. The condition of the body. When Jay was found, his body was in an advanced state of decomposition. At that point, any forensic certainty begins to break down. Bruises fade. Soft tissue breaks down. Internal trauma becomes harder to read. Toxicology becomes unreliable. And yet, Mark speaks with confidence. He says, "I didn't go to the location where his body was found, but I've seen pictures." Pictures don't tell you if someone was pushed. They don't confirm the cause of death. They don't prove where or when Jay died. Even the claim that Jay was identified by fingerprints raises questions. Fingerprints typically degrade with decomposition. Rehydration techniques might work, but no such method has been publicly confirmed. Mark doesn't ask how. He just repeats the official line. This isn't certainty, it's control. What's most concerning isn't how many red flags exist. It's that Mark Williams Thomas doesn't engage with any of them. He doesn't challenge Lucy's contradiction. He doesn't reflect on the failed search. He doesn't revisit the claim that Jay left feeling scared. He builds a clean, controlled narrative, while ignoring every chaotic, inconvenient truth. This isn't the work of someone trying to uncover the full story. It's the work of someone trying to close it down. Neatly. Because now, it's not about what happened to Jay Slater. It's about how Mark Williams Thomas will be remembered. And we've seen this pattern before. In high-profile missing persons cases, certain names always seem to appear. Not because they're officially involved, but because they know how to insert themselves into the story. They offer expertise. They claim insight. They give families hope. But when you look closer, what they're really doing is stepping into the spotlight. Peter Faulding is a forensic search specialist and head of Specialist Group International. He's been involved in dozens of body recovery operations and presents himself as one of the world's top underwater search experts. In 2023, he was brought into the search for missing mother Nicola Bulley in Lancashire. Faulding told the media and the family that if Nicola had entered the river, he would find her. He said his sonar equipment was the best available and claimed that if she was there, he'd locate her within 3 days. He even publicly cast doubt on the police theory that she had drowned. But then Nicola's body was discovered. In the river. Exactly where police had said she likely was. And Faulding? He rewrote the story. He said it was Reed's. He hadn't searched that part of the bank. The conditions were difficult. The technology couldn't reach. His certainty dissolved. But by then, the headlines were already written. Now let's look at Mark Williams Thomas, the former police detective turned investigative journalist. He's best known for his role in exposing Jimmy Savile. Since then, he's built a media career around high-profile crime stories, including The Investigator, a British crime story, which aired on ITV and was later distributed by Netflix. Mark arrived in Tenerife just days after Jay Slater went missing. He met with Jay's family. He published updates. He shared insights, hinted at a criminal underworld, and referenced an alleged Snapchat about a stolen Rolex. On July 3, 2024, he publicly stated that Jay left the Airbnb feeling scared and refused to return, even though that would have been the safest, most logical choice. He also told Jay's mother that within 3 days, he'd be able to determine whether others were involved. But that wasn't the end of the story. Even in October 2024, Mark was still suggesting suspicion, still implying there could be foul play. He kept questions open. He kept the narrative alive. Then in May 2025, during his appearance on the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly podcast, he reversed course. Mark stated clearly that Jay fell, that no one was with him, that he wasn't chased, wasn't moved, wasn't pushed. His words were, he fell, he died. End of period. Just like Faulding, he walked back the very suspicion he helped amplify. Just like Faulding, he didn't address the red flags, not even the ones he himself had raised. No mention of Lucy's contradictory statements. No mention of the Guardia Civil's failed search. No mention of the Dutch scent dogs who independently tracked Jay's trail a month later. No mention of the body being so decomposed that fingerprint identification should have been impossible. No challenge to the location pin or the lack of wildlife activity or why Jay would trek into extreme terrain without water. He didn't resolve any of those concerns. He simply ignored them. Peter Faulding promised certainty. So did Mark. When that certainty collapsed, both retreated, behind explanations that only protected themselves. And for both men, there was something else happening too. During the Nicola Bulley search, Faulding was promoting his book, What Lies Beneath. His profile surged. Public awareness of SGI grew. His brand, not just his findings, was what benefited. Mark Williams Thomas? He operates through media. He crafts updates, controls narratives, and works with broadcasters. His Netflix series, his documentaries, they're all extensions of the same identity. The man who solves cases others can't. But when the questions get uncomfortable, they stop investigating. They start retreating. Because these men aren't just chasing truth. They're building careers. They're not just detectives. They're performers. And they're not here for justice. They're here for visibility. And when they leave, the families are still grieving, and the answers are still missing. Because in the end, it was never really about Nicola. And it's not about Jay. It's about them. So now that we've heard it all, the updates, the reversals, the media performances, let's take a breath and step back. We've been told it was an accident. We've been told Jay fell. We've been told there was no one else involved. And we've been told more than once that this case is closed. But we don't believe that, because nothing about this case feels closed. Not when the witness statements contradict. Not when the search dogs fail, then succeed weeks later. Not when the friends change their stories. Not when the body is too decomposed for clarity, but still gets identified by fingerprint. And not when even the investigators who inserted themselves into this case won't answer for the contradictions they introduced. We've seen how narratives change, we've seen how attention fades, and we've seen how quickly people, even so-called experts, retreat when their version of events stops making sense. But this isn't just about media control. It's about a young man who disappeared under suspicious circumstances and a family still searching for answers. Because if Jay's death was simply a tragic fall, then why does so much still not add up? Why won't people like Mark Williams Thomas engage with the serious red flags? Why did he pivot from Jay was scared to he just fell? And why is no one holding him, or others like him, accountable for shaping the public perception of this case without ever facing the facts? We've laid it out clearly. This isn't about resolving the story. This is about controlling it. And we won't allow that to be the final word. We believe foul play has not been ruled out. We believe too many loose ends remain. And we believe that Jay Slater deserves better. Better than PR campaigns, better than media silence, and better than a shallow conclusion drawn for someone else's convenience. This isn't over, and we will keep asking questions, because Jay can't. Thanks for watching, and as always, we love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments below.